Hey guys, so I wanted to run through a tutorial on how I would tackle making a cave. I'll take it all the way from Maya to Unity, and we're going to use Substance Painter to texture it, although we'll also look at what it looks like with just a repeating texture. So I'm going to start with a cube. I'm using D to relocate the pivot point. So I hit D for a dog on the keyboard, and then I'm holding V to snap that pivot point to a vertex, and then I moved it up by holding X. Well, first I hit W to go to the move tool, and then hold X to snap it to the grid, and that'll have the cube flat on the grid. Now I was going to start with a sphere, but the problem with the sphere is the pinwheel shape on the top. So instead I'm going to start with um, a cube and then divide it up um, using the subdivide operation. So that tool is up here on the toolbar, right? It looks like two planes, one white and one orange. But I don't really want just a pure sphere, so I'm going to undo that really quick and make more of a longer shape, right? So that I can have kind of that cave-like feel to it. Um, I'll add a few subdivisions in here just to keep the shape a little bit better, right? You can think of those like almost like support beams, right? When you have subdivisions and you're going to subdivide something, um, it's going to help keep the shape a little bit closer to a cube rather than shrinking straight to a sphere. So after subdividing a few times, I switch over to my sculpting tool. Right now the tool is too large, so I double click on the icon on the bottom underneath the scale tool, and I test out the size and the strength of the tool. Notice I also have my direction set to camera. You can either use camera or the normals selection. Either one should work. Then I'm just going to go ahead and mash up the shape a little bit so that it has a little more of that cave wall texture to it, or cave wall shape, right? Um, where things have been kind of molded by centuries of water erosion. So, not being too specific in my case, you could go and grab some good, reference photos. I was looking at some photos of caves yesterday, so I had an idea of what kinds of shapes I was going to go for. But you can see really it's just a bit of a blobby shape, and then I leave the cave floor relatively flat, right? Especially if I'm going to be placing objects down on that cave floor, like later I'm going to put some barrels on there. If I have a really knobby cave floor, then it's going to kind of jut into my object geometry, which I don't want. So I can always hold shift to smooth out any sculpted areas, like here where it's gotten a little bit folded. And I can hold control to push inwards, right? Otherwise, the default operation is going to pull that geometry out towards the camera. Now that I've got a shape, I might also change up the brush size and strength a few times, right? Just to make sure that the mold isn't totally uniform. Then I'm going to prepare another cube, which is going to be um, something I'm going to subtract this shape out of, right? So I'm going to push this shape into the second cube, move it into place here, select the large cube, and then shift select the small cube, go to mesh, booleans difference, and hit apply. It's quite a complex shape, so it may take a second to compute, but there you can see you get that nice walls of the cave shape without too much effort. It's a lot harder if you're trying to sculpt something from the inside, right? If you use this method of sculpting from the outside and then using Boolean subtract, you get quite a nice result. So here you can see in wireframe mode uh, what that's accomplished. I'm just going to squeeze in the geometry of this box so that I'm not flying around too much. Next thing to do is to unwrap this object. So the reason to do that is since cave walls are so complex, there's going to be a lot of stretching. You'll see I turn on checkerboard mode here, and once you have that enabled, right, you can see the pixel stretching that's going to go on if I just apply texture to that object, which we don't want. So next thing to do is to choose a line or an edge that we're going to cut along. So I actually, after I finished, I realized I should have picked a slightly different edge. Here I'm just going to do a quick camera-based UV so that I can have all of that geometry mushed up in one place. That's gonna just gonna make it better when I want to unfold it. Then I'm gonna go looking for an edge to cut along. Now I ended up picking one kind of near the top corner ceilings, right? Like the upper left and upper right ceilings. You'll see when I double click on the edge. I could pick one that's straight down the middle, but the problem is that there's going to be a visible seam. Um, so what I end up doing is opting for something in the middle, kind of just above eye level. Although often what you'll see in cave textures is they'll actually make the cut closer to the ground. You'll see, especially if you look at a photo of a cave, right, that typically the ground has a slightly different texture than the walls. Usually, I mean, especially if it's been um, walked on, right? Like you'll see um, that quite obviously. So next thing to do is to use the unfold operation to start to get rid of the stretchiness on that texture. I mean, the cube got all stretched because it's still attached to pieces, so I'm just going to separate that out so it's not so distracting. I selected those faces and then just do a UV camera base and move that UV shell out of the way so that it's not so distracting. Now I'm going to come back into my main object. For some reason I got that little pinching problem over on the corner, so it's kind of formed a mouth shape. So I'm going to zoom into that pinch and go to UV or vertex mode. Select those two vertices that are bound together, right? And then just perform a cut operation on them, right? Under the cut and sew menu. So now those two vertices will be separated, so I can actually treat those shells as different objects once I do the other side. So same thing on the other side, select those vertices, cut them to separate them, and then I'll go into UV shell mode, select one of the halves, and perform an unfold operation on that. I can also use the optimize operation after I've done an unfold. That just helps flatten out the object even more. So I'm going to use Substance Painter to texture this just as a demo, so I'm booting that up while Maya thinks about the unfolds. And I click the unfold button on the second half, and then I'm going to move those two pieces into the U1 V1 space, right? That's the place where all the UV maps need to reside. So I'm not going to scale them separately just because they should still be using the same scale, right? I'm just checking kind of as well in the viewport, and it looks like the squares are all about the same size there. So select them both using UV shell, scale them down, and then move them into place. This scene has a lot of polygons in it, right? So it is chugging in a little bit. can see in the bottom left that little percentage bar ticking away right as I perform operations. It is having to like stop and calculate that stuff. So um, yeah, so don't be surprised if Maya slows down a little bit, and you can see I've turned off checkerboard in an effort to minimize that lag. So the other pieces also need to go under the U1 V1 square. So I'm just going to move those other parts of the cube in there. And I'm really not going to plan on showing those, right? I'll move my camera in such a way that I don't see that flat face of the cave. Um, but you could use a similar technique, right, of the sculpting tool um, to to create the outside of the cave if you wanted to show both the inside and the outside. So with my UVs in place, I'm going to export my file. So file, export selection, and export that as an FBX into a folder that you can easily find it in. Give it a name, say export, and then we can jump into Substance Painter. So in Substance, just close these windows, go File, New, and choose Select. I went to Template by mistake, so I hit Select and then find that FBX file that you just made. Hit OK, and it will import that 3D object into your scene. Now, first thing I did was check for materials that are built in to see if there are any cave or rock materials or smart materials that I could use. So you can do that by searching on the shelf at the bottom there. That's what it's that area is called, that houses all of your materials, smart materials, brushes, etc. I wasn't able to find any stone or rock materials in there, so it doesn't look like those ship by default. There might be something hidden in there that I didn't spot, but um, when I couldn't find anything, right, went to the internet, and Substance 3D has its own um, user-based sharing site, right, for free materials or paid materials, which is share.substance3d.com. There, you just need to log in to be able to download these materials. So I found a quick rock one that I liked, hit download, asked me to log in. You just use your personal Adobe account there to log in. It won't let you use your LSBU account. It's going to give me an S-bar texture um, or file that contains all the different material files in there. That needs to go under Documents, Allegorithmic, Substance Painter, Shelf, and that kind of file actually was just a material. It was not a smart material, so I put it into the Shelf/Materials folder. Once that's pasted in, I'll be able to find it under the Materials tab in the Shelf. You can just type in the name of that texture and you drag it into your layers area, right? So this adds that material as a layer. And rotate around, see how it looks. You can also shift and right click. I didn't demonstrate this, but if you shift and hold right click, you can move the lights around in Substance and it gives you a nice effect. So then you can go to File, Export Textures. Under the Config section, once you've picked a folder that you're going to export to, right, you want to choose the config type of where you're going to be using that file. So as you guys might have noticed, right, Unity and Maya use different kind of slots or files to create the same kinds of textures. So since I'm going to be using this in Unity, I'll do the Unity HD render pipeline, right, HDRP. Told it to stay at 2048 by 2048, especially since it's a large object, right? I want to use a higher res texture for a large object. Next, I'm going to start up my Unity project if I haven't already. Check that the files are there and okay. So it's given me base color, a normal map, and what Unity calls a mask map, which is 4 different texture types in one. Just while Unity boots up, I was going to test it out in Maya since I have the color map. So I can select my object, go to the hypershade, and apply that color map to the object just to see what it looks like in Maya as well if I want to. So hypershade, I made a blend texture just because sometimes cave walls are a bit shiny, they're a bit wet. If you have a dry cave, you might want it just a Lambert. Then I need to figure out where I put those files, right? Which were so first I'm just going to demonstrate with a plain old seamless texture that I found on the web. Right. This actually produces a pretty nice result because the UV wrap is doing the job, right? But you can see the seams along that edge where I made those cuts, and they are obvious from up close, but from a distance, they kind of blend in a little bit. So that's a point where I realized, oh, maybe I should have used the edges along the bottom, right, to have the cave floor be where the seam is. The other advantage to using the floor or the junction between the floor and the walls as the um, seam is that you can put like little rocks and things to cover up the seam um, rather than having it be exposed. So I'll make another texture in here, apply the Substance Painter texture, and see how that looks. See, this one is just a little bit grayer. The seam is still in there, maybe not quite as obvious from some angles. Next thing to do is to bring the textures and that object into my Unity scene. So this was the test scene that I made the other day. I'm just going to delete the stuff that I'm not going to be using in this scene, right? So the more modern stuff can go. Next thing, remember, you want to bring your materials or your textures into Unity first. Although in this case, I'm not using the export with embed media in Maya. So I'm just going to be making a new material anyway. So really it doesn't actually matter which order I do this part in. I'm going to grab that FBX cave file, the same one that I imported into Substance Painter, and bring that into my project. Notice, right, since I'm using Maya scale, that everything is way too small by a factor of about 100 times. So here I'm just moving my objects around, right, to kind of create a similar scene. The barrels with the sword jabbed into it. And I wanted to test the lighting and the kind of fire effects just to show that those will also look good in an interior environment, right? In fact, it's usually um, more effort to light an interior environment just because you don't have that sunlight to do all the shadowing for you. So you can create a lot of interesting moods with an interior environment rather than just having pure sunlight. I might have even wanted to delete my directional light to get rid of the sunlight. Next, I'm going to go to create my material. I right click inside assets, go to create material, give it a name. and I can drag each of those texture files into their respective slots, base map, mask map, normal map, and drag that material onto my object, and that is my result. So hopefully for you guys working on caves, this only took about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to complete. Even if you've already made some cave walls, right, maybe this will inspire you to go back and kind of try this Boolean method to get more of that natural shape for your cave walls, right? So good luck, guys. Please let me know on the channel if you run into any difficulties or can show me progress, right? This tutorial came about because I saw a few people were working on different kinds of cave scenes. So please let me know if you need anything, and I look forward to seeing your work.